So yeah, the author I'm going to talk to you about has unfortunately very few objects and books attached to her. Like there's no crazy mania around her, no t-shirts, no figurines, no nothing. And it's actually very hard to find her books. And I've been working on her because I've been trying to look at the response of women writers to naturalism in France, Germany, and Norway. And this woman writer is from France. Her name was Georges de Peyrebrune, and she's quite influenced by naturalist writing. And so yeah, that's how I came across her. And then, desperate, I asked the subject librarian for French for access to her books. And I was okay just having a digitized copy from the BNF, so the National Library from France. But we actually have, the Taylorian has actually purchased first editions of two of her books. One is Cassienne, that you can see here, and the other one is Au Pied du Mât. Oh, sorry, I started already. So I was saying that this author is very difficult to access, and so I wanted to put on this exhibition because we have first editions now here in the Taylorian. So to give you a little bit of context, Georges de Peyrebrune was born in 1841 in the Périgord, so in more or less the middle of nowhere in France. She was an illegitimate child, so that means her chances at life were a bit complicated at first. She married when she was 19, a man much older than her, but then she started writing and publishing in regional journals. And then she separated from her husband, not an official divorce, but she went to Paris, and she became actually a very, very successful author. And what I find fascinating about her is her engagement for publishing and putting forward other women writers. And so she had access to many publishing houses in Paris, and quite prestigious ones. But she was also, sharing advice and contacts within the publishing world with other younger women writers, which I find interesting because at the time, being a woman and writing was not something that was supposed to be possible. A decadent writer of the name Barbé d'Aurevilly actually said that no matter what women did, that is using male pseudonyms or using their father's names, using initials, or just publishing anonymously, he could literally smell a woman from the book. So it's quite interesting thinking about the materiality of the book, femininity always betrays itself. But Peyrebrune was pushing back against this, and what she did was trying to cultivate feminine and feminist literary circles. And it brought her to be on the jury of the first prize of Le Prix de la Vie Heureuse, because in 1907, women intellectuals in France were tired to see that the Prix Goncourt, very prestigious even today, was still awarded to a man after even with serious female competitors. And so they just said, let's just build our own feminine academy. And so they did, and Peyrebrune was of course part of this. So here you have different books, a biography on her written by Jean-Paul Socard, who has a very nice personal collection of her documents. I wanted to put also Victoire Larouche. It's a new edition, and it's been republished by this publishing house Talent Haut. under the line of edition of Les Plumés, so the feathered ones, if you can, in the feminine form in French, and it's about republishing women's writing. But their marketing strategy, I think advertisement strategy also is not really great. The cover for this one is quite good because it's about we have a redhead as a character, but otherwise their illustration style for the covers are quite, for other books, are quite mysterious to me. So it's like they're trying, but I don't know if it's working. But yeah, I won't complain because then I had access to this book through them. But I wanted to show you that there have been efforts in France to republish women's writing, but it's very slow. And over there, I put a letter of Émile Zola. If you're familiar with French literature, maybe you've heard of him. He's a canonical writer. He's maybe not the size of Goethe, but I've read him at school. Everyone knows him. And in the letter I put there, he's being quite cold about working with Peyrebrune and tells her that she's too impatient. And in turn, she will mock him in a satirical play called Jupiter et les bas bleus. Bas bleu comes from the English blue stockings, and in 19th century France, it was used to negatively designate women writers. And here he appears as Jupiter, and he puts women writers on trial, and they defend themselves. And so he's quite he's caricatured, and he's representing those male anxieties, about smelling a woman from a book, and but also this anxiety about women becoming real competitors on the publishing market, and having to reconcile all that. Here I put an edition of Sarah Bernard's Ma double vie. Sarah Bernard was a very, very famous actress. Actually, there was this summer an exhibition in Paris, and they argued that maybe Sarah Bernard is the one who invented the concept of the star. She was famous across the world, and she actually refused to play an adaptation of Gatien for the stage. So maybe Peyrebrune would have been even more famous if Sarah Bernard would have played for her. And if you're interested about end of 19th century France and theater, I think it's a very, very interesting text, this autobiography. But let's move on to the last bit of the exhibition. So this one is all about her friendship with the other woman writer, Rachilde. And those two women were quite different. Peyrebrune was more on the naturalist side, looking at social issues. She was also a feminist, she called herself a feminist, while Rachilde was known as the queen of the decadence. And her female characters are sadistic and manipulative heroines who take pleasure in torturing men, which was quite scandalous at the time. And here I've put a first edition signed also of her pamphlet on why I'm not a feminist. So quite the controversial figure right there. And it would seem that those two women could not have been friends, but they were. Another scholar has found letters from Rachilde to Peyrebrune, and it's quite touching. There were, at the start, Rachilde, who was younger than Peyrebrune, when she came to Paris, she was seeking help, and Georges de Peyrebrune was kind of a mentor figure. But then Rachel married Alfred Valette, who owned the journal Le Mercure de France, which was then very influential, and she was the one in charge of writing novel critics. And so then Peyrebrune asked of her, like, help, can you publicize my own books? And in what I find a very interesting letter, Rachel talks to Peyrebrune about the sexual harassment that young women writers are facing. And she tells her, and sorry for the swearing words, that's what she uses in French, but she says, if a woman is not a whore, she will not access anything. And she even tells Peyrebrune, you know that better than anyone. And unfortunately, we don't have a copy of this book, but then Peyrebrune writes about this topic in Le Roman d'Arba Bleu, the novel of a blue stockings. And the whole plot is around this young woman writer who comes to Paris and who has to choose between her literary ambitions and her bodily autonomy and her dignity, so to say. And I found this quite striking. I don't think this happened in the UK, but in France we had a Me Too about publishing houses. There have been, I think in 2019, scandals around sexual harassment faced by novelists in the publishing world. And I find it fascinating that Peyrebrune already was saying that this was an issue, and that's why her works, I think, are worth discovering today. And also kind of, make me question, and maybe this is interesting for you in links to this class, is like, who has the power to publish people? And how do they get that power? What happens behind the scenes? I've just recently read an article about the mythical, kind of relationship between the publisher and the editor and the author, and that it's not seen as a professional relationship, but more as a kind of, more than friendship. And so when you get into that territory, things start getting dangerous, especially for people who are more vulnerable. And so those women were already aware of those problems. That's it from my side. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
If I can just say